Good morning. We are very thankful to see each of you this morning. Do hope that you'll stay and enjoy some biscotti, as my boys used to call it, after worship, and we'll enjoy that time together. We'll start from Galatians 6 this morning. I don't know why this template misspelled the word Galatians, but it did, and that's bothered me all week. But anyway, that was not my job. That was theirs. But Galatians 6, we will study from there this morning as we think about being burden bearers. When I was in West Virginia, it was a Sunday morning, and a lady came in and handed me a note and said, "Justin, this is for your eyes only." Okay? And that really piqued my curiosity. So after she had gone her way, I opened the note up. The note told me that she was having surgery the next morning and that no one from church was to know. It was not to be announced. It was not to be in the bulletin. And she was to have no visitors whatsoever from the congregation. I wanted to respect her wishes. So Monday morning, I worked in the office. Got a phone call a little while into that afternoon. It's her sister. Come to find out, Mary was very hurt that I did not come to the hospital. I tried to explain the contents of the letter, and Helen said, "Yes, Justin, we know about the letter. We know what it said, but that did not apply to you. You would be at the hospital." So from then on, whenever Mary had surgery or was in the hospital, she was elderly and was in the hospital a good bit, I did two things. One, I never told a soul. Often I would not even tell Tammy that Mary was in the hospital. But second, I always made sure that I went to the hospital. It was a life lesson for me. I'm sure you've known people like that. People who didn't want anyone to know what was taking place in their lives. It may have been that someone had surgery or was in the hospital or had a financial need or had this need or that need. You would have been more than happy to help. The church would have been more than happy to help. But no one ever helped because no one knew. But then maybe there's another situation you've been in. You yourself have had some struggle. Maybe there was something going on in your life and you just didn't want anyone else to know about it. But then maybe people knew about a struggle, a hardship you were facing, and no one did anything. You know, I remember when Tammy had carpal tunnel surgery. A.W. can attest, it's not a big surgery. We didn't need anyone at the hospital to help us. We had two little boys who were in school, and we needed somebody to help us get them to school. Congregation of 150, and nobody was willing to do that. So it actually looked like I was going to drop Tammy off the hospital, take the boy to school, and come back pick her up. Tammy's sister-in-law stepped in, and she came and saved the day, so to speak. Christians ought to be helping one another. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. In Galatians 1 to 5, in the book of Galatians, chapters 1 to 5, Paul has laid out some truths of God in that book. And then in chapter 6, what Paul begins to do is practicality. How do we apply these truths every day? How do the truths that Paul has talked about in chapters 1 to 5, how do we apply them in everyday Christian living? We're going to think about one of those applications in Galatians 6 this morning. And the lesson we want to learn is this, that Christians bear burdens. Christians bear burdens. If you learn nothing else this morning, learn that. That Christians bear burdens. The apostle says at 6:2, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." What does that mean? to bear one another's burdens. The word bear in Greek means to come along and to hold up one's hands or to lift up. The image is of some brother or sister struggling, and another brother or sister comes along and holds up the burden with which he is struggling, with which he or she is having to bear under that pressure. The word burden refers to large weight. Remember that. That'll be important in a minute. But the word burden is not simply something that you could lift by yourself. It is so heavy. It is so oppressive. There was no earthly way you could lift that by yourself. In fact, the word meant in Greek oppression. You know, when you talk about a dictator coming in and oppressing the people, this was the word that was used. It meant oppression. No earthly way you could do it yourself. Throughout the New Testament, we find examples where people would bear the burdens of others. We could be here all day talking about different examples where someone would come along and bear the burden of someone else. Let's think of two this morning. I like Mark 1, 40 to 45, where Jesus heals a leper. A leper comes to Jesus, implores the Lord to be made clean, to have pity on him. Jesus sees this man, filled with compassion. The text says he reaches out and touches him. Do you understand what Jesus did there? He reached out and touched him. Lepers were unclean, with good reason. It was a highly contagious, a highly dangerous disease. This man has likely not had human touch in years and years and years. But Jesus ignores the societal norms. Not only does he heal the man, but he reaches out and touches him, connects with him on a personal one-to-one level. You talk about lifting a burden. To be touched by the Master of the universe, to be shown compassion, to be shown love, and then to be healed of your leprosy. Jesus, in fact, was all about bearing burdens. As you read through the Gospels, whether it's the woman at the well, the widow of Nain who had lost her only son, and on and on and on we could go. How that Jesus would come along and see these people with great heavy burdens and come and lift it from them. But then I also think of Acts 9. Saul and Barnabas. You know the text. Saul was going to Damascus to persecute Christians. Had an encounter with Jesus that changed his life forever. He was very repentant on the road to Damascus. Went into Damascus and was told what he should do. Preached Jesus there in Damascus when he'd gone there to persecute Christians. Had gone back to Jerusalem. And now he wants to join the disciples in Jerusalem. They're not too sure about this fella. Why would they be? Here was one who had tried to kill them, and now he wants to come and join them. As you read the text carefully, it almost sounds as though the Christians there thought Paul may be something of a spy. He doesn't really want to join the disciples. He only wants to get in there and learn who's really a Christian and then kill them. But then Barnabas, that son of encouragement, comes along, takes Saul under his wing, takes him to the apostles, lifts that heavy burden. Oh, we as the people of God need to be burden bearers, to bear the burdens of others. Paul says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. How? How does bearing the burden of another fulfill the law of Christ? I've thought about that question long and hard this past week. How is it that bearing someone else's burden is fulfilling the law of Christ? It's doing what Jesus taught. It is the law of Christ to bear the burdens of others. Here are some ways. Jesus taught us to love one another, did he not? And is not bearing the burden of another a great demonstration of love? You remember what Jesus says? John 13:34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. That was in the Old Testament, Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself. But that's not what he says here, is it? It's not love your neighbor as yourself. It's as I have loved you, that you also love one another. That's how it's a new commandment. Not to love as you love yourself, but to love as Jesus loves. To go that extra mile. To love sacrificially above anything this world knows by its natural course. To love. And is not bearing the burdens of others a great way to demonstrate that love? How else is bearing the burdens of others demonstration of love? The Lord Jesus taught us to serve one another. My mind goes back to what we call the Last Supper, where Jesus got up from supper, took off his outer garments, wrapped himself in a towel, got down and washed the disciples' feet. Job of a slave. Not the job of the master of the universe. But Jesus doesn't care about that. He's about service. And here are those who need to be served, and Jesus girds that towel about himself and serves. Jesus also taught us that the greatest in the kingdom is a servant. Matthew 20:26 and 27. Whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. If you want to be great in the kingdom of God, don't try to be a great, well-known preacher. Don't try to do all these great ladies' days and VBSs and everything else. That's not how you get great in the church. Greatness comes by being a slave, by being a servant, and is not bearing the burdens of others being a servant. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. But I can hear some of you thinking, Justin, that's good. I want to bear the burdens of others. But I want to bear my own burdens. You know, we're Americans after all. We're self-reliant. We're taught to do it ourselves, to work and to make our own way. Well, I've got good news for you. Paul says down at verse 5 to do that for yourself. He says, Galatians 6:5, each one shall bear his own load. The King James here says burden. It's not burden. And I don't like that translation, to be honest with you. Paul almost sounds inconsistent to, in this same paragraph, to on the one hand say bear one another's burden, so fulfill the law of Christ, and then at the end of the paragraph to say bear your own burdens. The Greek words here are vastly different. Remember, the word of verse 2, as we talked about, means oppression. Something you could never do on your own. The word here was a military term used for a soldier's kit or backpack. In other words, it's something that you easily can carry on your own. Easily done by one person. Think of the difference in this way. Think of verse 2 referring to a boulder. A big old rock there is absolutely no way you can lift. Think of the word at verse 5 as meaning a pebble or piece of gravel. Something easily picked up and even placed in your pocket. That's really the difference in these two words. One is no way. One is very easily do yourself. We need to be people who not only bear the burdens of others, but people who bear our own load, who when it's able to do it ourselves, we stand up. We bear it ourselves. You see, the message of Paul, message of God through Paul, is that Christians bear burdens. We as Christians are to be burden bearers. We are to bear burdens. But practically, how does that bear out? How do we put this into practice in a day-to-day world, in the world in which we find ourselves, the world in which we live, as we go to work, as we go to school, as we interact with people, church? How does this come into play? How do we do this? Well, I think there are three big ways that we bear burdens as Christians. Number one, we must be people who are willing to bear the burdens of others. We must be people who are willing to bear the burdens of others. Is that not the message of Galatians 6:2? Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. How do we do that? We can pray with and for the individual. I know, you understand. I trust that the way we bear burdens is going to depend largely on the burden the person has and how we go about bearing it. But there are some universal things that we can apply across any situation. Number one is to pray with and for that individual. I think of Acts 12, where Peter has a great big burden. Peter, you understand, is in prison. He's put in prison because Herod sees that the killing of James has really gotten the Jews' attention, made him a superstar among the Jews, if you will. And so he arrests Peter, puts him into prison. And Peter is awaiting certain execution. He's going to be killed. That's why he put people in prison. But then we read in Acts 12:5, constant prayer, not just a prayer every now and then, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. Did it work? God sends an angel to let Peter out of prison. They were in constant prayer. Oh, you better believe it worked. Understand, prayer is powerful because we pray to a powerful God. And God sends an angel, lets Peter out of prison. And let people know you're praying for them. Let them understand that you love them that much, that you care that much, that you are remembering their name before the very throne of God. Well, we can pray. What else can we do? Well, as we've already mentioned, like Jesus, we must be willing to serve. Just like Jesus was willing to take that towel and gird himself with it, get down and wash the feet of his disciples, serve them, give them an example of service. We too must be people who are willing to serve. I don't know what burden you might be able to lift this week or next week, and so I can't tell you how to serve. But you're smart folks. You know service when you see it. Let's not be afraid to get our hands dirty and to serve the needs of others. But But let us be a people who are called to service. God has called us to serve one another. And let us be willing to do that, to serve the needs of others. Commit to bearing a burden this week. Commit to bearing a burden as you see someone struggling. I don't know when that's going to be. I can't predict that. But we can commit to bearing burdens when we see them. Commit to helping where there's a need. We can do that. As the people of God, my brethren, we must do that. Also, we must allow others to bear our burdens. That's difficult, I know. We're Americans, we're self-reliant, we like doing things ourselves. You know, if I'm going somewhere, I'm not going to stop and ask directions. I'll use the GPS, but ask for help, no. I get something, I'll put it together, I'll read the directions, but to ask for help, it's hard. But you see, if I refuse to allow you to help me bear my burden, I'm refusing to allow you to be a blessing. We have to understand that. That if we refuse others to serve us, we're refusing them a chance to be like Jesus. And who are we to refuse people the chance to be like Jesus, to serve? We have sometimes to swallow the pride and allow others to serve us. Maybe you have a burden that you need some help bearing. Maybe something's going to happen this week or next week or a month from now that you're going to need some help with. Let's commit to allowing others to bear the burdens that we can't do ourselves. To be willing to ask for help. Be willing to accept help. That people might demonstrate Jesus living in them, not just in us. Also, according to verse 5, we need to bear our own load. We cannot expect other people to do everything for us. I understand. I just talked about allowing others to serve us and to help us. That's as true as it can be. It's biblical. But it's also biblical that with those loads, we don't go to other people. We do it ourselves. Paul says, let each man carry his own load. You see what we have to do? We have to do some soul searching. What is a load that we ourselves can bear? What's a burden that we need help bearing from someone else? Yeah, I can't answer that question. But you can look in your own life and you can make those determinations. What do you need help doing? What must you do yourself? You know, we can never become dependent people, waiting on other people, dependent on other people. And Paul says that right here in the text. Let each man bear his own load. And as we carry our own load, we do not burden others. As important as it is for us to think about our loads and what we ourselves can do for ourselves, it's very important to understand there are some things that we can never do for ourselves. There are some things that you and I simply do not have the ability or the power to do ourselves. There is absolutely no way that you or I could ever save ourselves.